So we have a Dungeons and Dragons 5e tier list maker. There are 13 classes in 5e, 5th edition, and they're listed down here. So we're gonna go through them, and I think we need to rank these and see if we agree on these for the majority. So
can you add a tier for me? Is that a thing you can do?
I don't know if I can add a tier on this. I don't think I can.
Okay.
No, because it's a community thing.
Oh, okay. Never mind then.
What does this do? Oh, I can add a row. Add a row below.
Do it. Yes.
Anyway, so we have these different classes down here, and we're gonna take a look at that. So the first one is Barbarian. What do you think about barbarians?
Okay, so I think if we're doing it in relative nature to each other, I'd probably put Barbarian in about C or B tier.
Okay, so I would have actually pushed it more towards A because I feel like it is the superior alternative to Fighter. But I guess I can agree with a B tier on that one.
So here's my thought process, right? I'm primarily thinking about non-homebrew core subclasses that come with like a player's handbook, right? Like you just got the player's handbook, you're new to D&D, you have to pick a class, you don't know what to pick. Let's look at a tier list and see what goes where, right? Barbarian, I would put in like a closer to like a B tier, just purely based off the fact that A, it starts with the letter B, and I think that's kind of neat. But also because barbarians, they give you enough versatility or they give you enough introduction to be a comfortable beginner class, especially with like the rage mechanic. It's a relatively simple class,
right?
And then whenever you get your subclasses, you do have that difference in interaction with the way that your rages work, which I think is cool. Don't get me wrong, that's great, but I don't think there's enough flexibility in Barbarian to keep it interesting for what happens after that player is no longer new to D&D. You know what I mean? There's not enough versatility until you start adding sourcebook after sourcebook after sourcebook, which is fine, but I feel like it requires too much extra stuff for the class to stand alone as something that would be higher than a B tier, not compared to say things like Druid, for example, with its many different circles that you can pick, or like the fact that it has wild shape, and you get so many things with something like Druid, for example, or like with Bard. There's so many different things that you can do and so many different ways to interact that Barbarians just don't have.
So I mean, I kind of agree with you, but to that extent, you're mentioning the fact that there's not a lot of things that'll keep it interesting into later sessions. I have to disagree with you on that, specifically because of the wild magic ancestry, I believe. I forget exactly the term for it, but basically with certain actions that you take on that, I believe once you're in a rage, it can activate wild magic, I believe once per turn. Every time that you get hit, it causes a wild magic surge, which can cause all sorts of ridiculous things to happen around you. I would put that as interesting as a sorcerer in that regard. But of course, it's the better martial class, I think. When it comes between fighter and barbarian, barbarian is better just because you get the rages are really cool. Your health gets stacked up really high. Just right. Overall, like it feels like the better alternative of the two. And I think you can wear up to medium armor before you start losing buffs.
But I don't think you want armor as a barbarian in general for the unarmored defense anyway.
It depends on which subclass you take.
Yeah, which subclass. Yeah, but that's what I'm talking about. Like, I feel like just the core identity of a class, if we're just going based on the core identity as a class, I don't know. I feel like, yeah, you could add some more magical elements to it, but I feel like just as an identity, it just, I don't know. It just seems simple in a good way, but not complex enough to compare to other classes. You know what I mean? Like to certain other classes. That's why I think like a healthy mid-tier is pretty good for Barbarian.
No, I totally agree with you. I think Barbarian's a solid B tier. All right, with that, how about Bard?
If if we're talking about class wise, I'd probably also put that B tier, but I want to put it in F tier just because I just in Bard players.
So
Just Bard players. But yeah, B, I think B to A.
Oh, really? I would have pushed it down to C, and here's my reasoning for it. Bard is a half decent support class, but as a solo, let's say you are playing absolutely by yourself, Bard is very squishy. Like, the Bardic Inspiration is a heavily, party-focused thing. You can give it to yourself, but it's not something that you really benefit from unless you build it as, like, are you trying to talk your way through a campaign? If you're going to talk your way through a campaign, fine, Bard is phenomenal for that. But there are other classes that are also charisma casters, so you don't need to be a Bard for that. There are other options to do that. The only benefit I think you see as a Bard is the fact that you get all the boosts specifically to anything charisma or performance based, which again works better as a group activity. Maybe you're trying to talk your way into a castle or out of getting arrested. There's a variety of things, or of course the dragon. I'm not gonna say any more than that, but
I see where you're going with this, but the problem though is, like, you also have to remember that different Bardic colleges give you different things. Like, for example, like the College of Valor alone is pretty substantially busted. You get martial weapons, you get medium armor and access to shields, you get extra attacks, you get battle magic, right? I don't think to call it just a support class, or primarily support class rather.
Yeah, but there's nothing in that you couldn't get with a Warlock, and a Warlock gets extra spells and things. Again, Bard, if you're playing,
you have to rely on spell slots.
With Warlock?
Yeah.
They do technically get the spell slot, quote unquote, but theirs regenerates after a short rest. So
with Bards, you can do dexterity. You have to remember dexterity is still its secondary main stat.
That's true.
Bards are martial fighters. It's just that they also have CC abilities.
I don't know. I'm thinking C for Bard, to be honest, just because I know how people abuse it, and truth be told, I've never seen a solid Bard player.
That's all right. I'll play Bard next time. I got you. We'll say C tier for now, but I got you.
All right. Okay, Cleric. I already know what you're gonna say for this.
What am I gonna say?
You're gonna say this is a solid S tier.
You know what? Yeah. yeah. Like, and the funny thing is, I'm mainly saying it for the meme, but also the more that I sit down with Cleric, right, the more I realize how versatile clerics really are, like, right from the gate. Like, if you're just taking core D&D, player's handbook and, like, your basic, like, Sword Coast Adventures and Sword Coast Guide and stuff like that, clerics are really, really versatile class. And also, if you think about this in Final Fantasy terms, it's a white mage. No one messes with a white mage. You don't bite the hand that feeds you. You don't mess with the cleric, right? No, don't talk back to the healer.
You know what? I actually have to agree with you on this one, and I've never actually played a cleric in D&D. I've seen them played, and moreover, I've played Baldur's Gate. So you play Shadowheart, you recognize just how overpowered she is. Yep. So I have to agree with you on this one. Cleric is an S tier, even though it is heavily crapped on in the community, being, oh, what do you need a cleric for? We have a paladin.
Listen, as a cleric, right, I am the arbiter of who gets to live and who gets to die, right? I could just choose to not spare the dying you. I could just choose to not heal you. And guess what? Because we have a paladin who's constantly on the brink of death, because they're constantly getting into fights, right? I'm all that's left.
The paladin that forgets they have lay on hands.
What's lay on hands?
Right?
Is that part of my oath of vengeance? Is that part of my oath breaker?
Is that part of my oath breaker? That's really the question, isn't it?
every single paladin, they're like, yes, I will be a warrior for my god and my deity. How do you break your oath? every time, never fails. The second they hit that 4th session, they're like, I get to do what?
Yeah.
With what? Every time.
Yep.
Every time.
Okay. Well, for the sake of time, we'll move on from Cleric. Next one is Druid.
I'd say A tier. I'd say A tier, close to S tier.
I am in 100% agreement with you. Wild Shape is overpowered. It is extremely versatile. The fact that you just get to know all of the spells and cast them pretty much at will is extremely broken.
Well, I don't even think it's just that. I think it's what makes Cleric and Druid so good is also just how interesting they can be for the player in terms of like either introspection or roleplay opportunities. Like, for example, with clerics and paladins being able to talk to their deity, or warlocks being able to have that roleplay ability with their patron. Druids having the ability to really try and commune with nature. Or maybe if, let's say, you're in a place that's entirely man-made, or maybe like you're in like a somewhat steampunk-esque thing. A lot of the times druids, especially druid players that main druid, like really, really, really get into character. Mm-hmm. A lot of them will have a lot to say about being in an entirely man-made object, right? Or in an entirely man-made location. And I think it allows for that roleplay ability to really shine through, whereas things like barbarians and fighters just don't have that unless they really try to play out their character specifically. And even then, their class might not really have much to do with it. Whereas druids, I don't feel like they suffer from that problem.
Oh, right, 100%. Also, when it comes to druids, Halston is daddy. Moving on, talking about Dad, fighter.
Stop it.
Yeah, talk to the internet. They'll agree.
I'm just saying. Okay, the one thing with Halston, I will agree with you on this one, right? Why do you have to choose the man or the bear when you can just have both?
He is both. Moving on. Going on to fighter. I think I know where I would put this. I don't know if you'd agree with me. I'm just gonna place it.
This is no. One more.
Really?
One more
it's not
that's
that
why I had
bad.
You, that's why I had you make it. No, that's why I had you make it.
Come on.
Put it in the tier.
Listen, hear me out. Fighter is a solid class for a beginner. Never having played D&D, it is a solid class for a beginner. There is nothing wrong with fighter if you are learning the mechanics of the game.
Okay, I'm sorry. I agree with you. Don't get me wrong. I agree with you. But also, it is the Starbucks white mocha frappuccino of D&D. Stop it. It's basic. I'm not rewarding your basic expletive garbage. Bad.
But listen, if you're just starting out, this is your first game and you don't know anything about role-playing games, tabletop, or else, or otherwise, and you just want to get into D&D and slay a monster, fighter is fantastic for that.
All right. If I'm being honest, it's probably closer to like A tier. I think A tier is actually probably.
You actually put it above Barbarian?
Yeah. Well, okay. So here's the thing, right? I'm trying to think about it in terms of versatility, maintaining interest, stuff like that.
There are a lot of paths.
Most barbarians feel kind of samey until you get to like either being totemic or not. But other than that, most barbarians feel pretty similar. Fighters, on the other hand, you've got battle mages, you've got archers, you've got like gladiator type stuff. Like there's so many different ways to play a fighter that actually allow for roleplay creativity in terms of people making their characters. Definitely. Especially when you think about like races, for example, right? Different races will have different cultures, and with those different cultures, they'll also bring different fighting styles, different fighting techniques, stuff like that. A lot of people tend to look at fighters like a very good generalist stat stick more than anything else, because let's be honest, if you're a combat-oriented player, you don't care about role-playing. You're just going to pick the same thing over and over and over again, right? But if you're not playing fighter to be just a massive walking stat sheet, right? There's actually a lot of opportunity to make either different, unique characters to really be able to flush out the things that your characters are into. Without having to like multi-class, for example. Mm-hmm. Or let's say you can make really creative. You can at least in a somewhat creative way, take characters from other franchises. Like you can make like Batman, boom, fighter. You can make like, I don't know, Superman, boom, fighter, but just add some magic or something to it. There's so many different options for you to be able to use as a fighter, and fighter just feels more like a template than just like a class. And I think that creativity should be rewarded. I think Wizards really, kind of hit it out of the park with fighter. It's really difficult to argue against fighter, honestly. I just hate fighter.
So I'm gonna put it here first. No.
Yes, let's go.
I think honestly, I would agree with you, but to that extent, fighter does still feel a bit bland in comparison to some of the other ones. I would personally put it in B, right along with barbarian.
We can put it in B. I'll do that because my biggest problem with fighter isn't necessarily even the class; it's the players.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. I mean, every Kirito wannabe is gonna pick a fighter because what else are they gonna do?
Yeah, I don't want to punish the class for the players being weird.
True. Moving on from that, next is monk. Now, monk is an interesting one because, like, if you know how to play monk correctly, you can do some real damage. But if you don't know what you're doing with monk, it's basically just a worse fighter.
I genuinely think monk is a C tier. I think so. Yes, I wholeheartedly agree with you. If you really know what you're doing, monk can easily be an A tier, but the problem is being able to weave your combos consistently. Unless you know what you're doing, it's really difficult. You know, going back to what I was saying before about, you know, let's say you're a new player, you don't know what to pick. Monk is a hard sell to a newer player, almost kind of like wizards. It's got that intimidation factor, right? With being able to do, you know, your different abilities, being able to like stack your points effectively, stuff like that. It's hard to sell to a newer player who's already intimidated at the fact that they have to do math voluntarily.
I'll be honest, you know, compare that to a wizard. I think a wizard's actually easier to sell in the long run, mainly because
easily.
When it comes to magic, I mean, the idea of you have the spell slot, think of it as a currency. You spend the spell slot, now it's gone. But with monks, the way that they regenerate key points and the way that they're spent, it's not one key point per action. Some actions require multiple key points. You've got this little pool to worry about. Then you have to worry about stacking actions and things to actually do decent amounts of damage. And then not only that, but you have to build the character correctly or your monk is going to be absolutely terrible at fighting. So there's a number.
You choose to have a weapon.
Exactly. Like there's a number of things you really have to think about when you're building a monk that genuinely, like, it feels like the worst parts of fighter and wizard combined. Granted, if you know how to play it correctly, they're extremely powerful. But for a new player especially, I have to agree with you. I think C tier is a fair rating for that one.
I think monks are the like the epitome of min-max, but from the player side of things, if just on the character sheet.
Right.
It's just kind of a hard sell.
Next up, we have paladins. I'm gonna go for this. I think paladin is a solid A tier. And let me tell you why.
Okay.
They are the perfect blend of martial and spellcaster for someone who does not know how to play a sword mage of any kind.
You mean just like any kind of martial spellcaster? Right.
So in this regard, like the fact that paladins have support magic, they have offense magic, they do regenerate. Do they regenerate at half? No, they don't. They just regenerate like everyone else, a long rest. But the fact that they can use heavy armor without any penalties, the fact that they can use large weapons, I believe right out the gate. I think it's all martial weapons if I'm not mistaken.
For paladin, yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, it's just all martial weapons.
It's all simple, all martial, and then all armor and shields.
Exactly. They can use everything right out the gate. And the fact that they can unlock Oathbreaker, which is pretty cool, but you know, let's be honest, if you want to play an actual paladin for the sake of playing a paladin, you're not playing Oathbreaker. If you're playing paladin for the source of their powers, you're playing Oathbreaker. So, you know, you really have to kind of balance it with that. But I think it's a really well-rounded class that can, it's definitely your, hey, let's send this guy in to go kill this monster. He's the guy that you send to the front lines. And I mean, as you've seen, Austin is a massive paladin player. He loves to play paladin and druid. And between those two, I do think they are very well-rounded classes for what they are.
So I do agree. That's all I got, honestly. Yeah, no, because I was, again, I don't want to punish the class for its player base. And like I was saying with Druid and Cleric, I there's a lot of room for roleplay opportunity and for interactiveness between the player and well, I guess the player and the player. Because having that backstory as to why they're a paladin, or having that interaction between that and their divine, their divine patron or deity, it makes it really, really good as a player to be able to have that unique interaction between myself and the DM technically.
Right.
Especially when it comes to like with paladin specifically, like what do you do with the dilemma of killing somebody? Right, like does it go against your oath or your tenets? And then there's also some DMs. This is something that I used to do. I don't really do it as much anymore, just because I don't have enough opportunity to do this anymore. But what I used to do is I would actually come up with custom tenets based off of the patron or the god that they chose. Right. So like let's say they would take an oath of vengeance, but they would pick a non-vengeance-y character. Right, God. So like, let's say they were picking like a god of like love and happiness and rainbows and stuff. Right. Part of the oath of vengeance would be to go out of their way to chastise those that would purposefully like be homewreckers. Right. Or like go out of their way to like get rid of people who would take loved ones away, right? In terms of like, let's say killing a child or something like that. Right. Because it not only is it evil, but it's a specific kind of evil that goes against your specific god's tenets, right? As opposed to just evil is evil and good is good, right? It's not as mundane as that. It's not as black and white as that. And I don't know. I feel like every god needs to be given more life. I feel like gods, especially recently, I feel like gods and the faith of clerics and paladins have taken a back seat recently, because what I feel is like a lot of it is more like it's a deity, but the deities have no depth. Right. They have no personification. There's no character. There's no moral ambiguity with a lot. I'm saying there's too much moral ambiguity with these characters. There's too much like there's too much black and white with these characters, but not, hey, this is okay. Sometimes, like there's no nuance.
So I'll interject on that one. I think when it comes to the vagueness of the deities, I will agree with you, but I think that was intentional. I think the reason they are particularly vague is because wizards wanted people to go in and make the deities in their images. They wanted to say, hey, this one character over here, you make them whatever you want within these guidelines. It's meant for the DM to flush out. Now, if the DM does a poor job,
I'm saying it's a bad DM issue.
Yeah, I will 100% agree with you on that one.
It's a bad DM issue. I feel like a lot of DMs will take a backseat because they'll flush out these really, really big worlds or whatever. But in those worlds that they make, there's no room for any sort of gods or goddesses or whatever, unless the god or goddess that's in it is a bad guy. You know what I mean? Yeah. Or is like a plot device of some sort. Right, like there's no room in a lot of those stories where like the other gods might exist, the other pantheons might exist, but it's just not important enough to the DM for them to actually roleplay and flush it out. So they use it more as like backstory and stats.
I think every DM has done that to some extent, though. Everyone's guilty of it, mainly because like you can't put your heart and soul into, you can't spend 1,000 hours on a campaign that's going to last 25 hours. No one has that kind of time, and if you do, like, kudos to you, but also maybe get a job and take a shower. But
valid.
No, honestly, it's like I get it, but at the same token, but I would say the solution to this is talk with your players. If your players want to do something with, let's say they're going to pick a paladin, right, and they want a specific patron, make sure you know who they're going to pick, and then you flush out that patron to do something and be interactive with the player to some extent. It doesn't necessarily mean speaking directly to them, but it may mean that, they sense certain emotions coming from their plane, or not the plane, what is it? The domain. They may sense certain, emotions coming from a certain domain, or, things like it. Be prepared to send them into an oath breaker if they do things against their oath as a paladin. Like, understand what it is that boundary, because in doing so, you are giving depth to that deity or that patron.
Yeah, this is why I stress the importance of a session 0 whenever I DM, just because I need to know right from the get-go any changes that I have to make to the campaign at the beginning.
Right.
You know what I mean? Especially if like the world that I've created or the place that we're in, if you're gonna sit here as a ranger and have your favorable terrain be like the tundra or whatever, but you're going to the hells, why?
You're not gonna have a good time.
I'm not gonna do that to you. You know what I mean? Like,
and on that note, how about ranger?
Ooh, I have such a love-hate relationship with ranger.
So
honestly,
I would agree with you. I've got some frustrations with ranger. I think I've heard. Now, I haven't played the new ranger in the new version of D&D, and that's a whole nother conversation. Maybe we'll do that on the next time that we get together and do another one of these. But
yeah, for sure.
I know that they've made some changes to ranger. I don't know what they are. I know that in 5th edition, anyways, ranger could be good with some subclasses. Like if you built it correctly, rangers could be pretty good. That said, a lot of the paths you can take as a ranger, basically just like, okay, you're a fighter but worse, and you have some magic. Like,
right.
It's like you could just pick a spellcaster, a martial spellcaster. You could pick a paladin and do most of the same things a ranger could do, as far as what you're doing if you don't build the ranger correctly.
Yeah, alternatively, you can just play a rogue.
That said, some of the stuff like the what is it, the Beast Tamer? Not Beast Tamer. What's
Beastmaster?
Beastmaster. Beastmaster's pretty cool. I have to say that's an interesting mechanic. Then again,
so here's the issue, right? That right there, therein lies the issue, right? Because I've played a lot of other games that have a very similar kind of like trope when it comes to rangers and stuff like that. And in it, the only actual World of Warcraft is really a big example of this, right? Because they have, historically speaking, throughout almost every patch since like vanilla WoW. I'm gonna go on a little bit of a tangent here. The hunter class, which is essentially like WoW's version of ranger, always terrible. The only time that a ranger was acceptable to play in terms of being fun or giving me a reason or an incentive to play the class literally at all is specifically within the beast mastery what do you call it, the like tree, right? That specific kind of subclass where I get a pet, I get a companion, I get to it is a thing that will forever define the ranger hunter-esque class, and you cannot get around that unless you introduce guns. If you can't introduce guns into the mix, rangers will almost always be very, very one note, and it's a shame because like things like the what do you call it, like the Gloomstalker class, and then what was the other one? It was like Horizon Walker or something like that, where you're essentially playing Portal but with a bow. Things like that, they seem cool on the surface until you actually start playing it, and it just feels too, I guess, boring. Again, I also haven't played the new version of the Ranger class, so you could actually they could have fixed a lot of those issues. I'm sure they did.
Definitely.
Right? But just historically speaking, it's just, I don't know. I've had, unless you are the kind of person that wants like an owlbear or just a regular bear or a badger for some reason.
If you want an owlbear, just get a paladin. Or a paladin, what am I saying? Just get a druid.
This is true. But you get what I'm saying though. Like, it just, I don't know. Unless you want to be the animal, it just doesn't feel like there's, unless you want an animal of some kind, it just doesn't feel worth it, right? Especially like with me, like I said, I like to take the urchin background. I got a pet mouse. I'm down for that.
Yeah.
That's kind of neat.
And that's, I mean, you're basically just a young version of Minsk.
Yes.
You've got Boo!
Yeah.
But no, absolutely. I think Ranger, I don't want to say they dropped the ball on it or anything. I do think that it's a very complicated class for what it is. And if you're not ready to play Ranger, if you don't have any kind of guidance on that, it's going to fall flat every time.
I don't even think it's that. I just think Ranger as a concept is really, it's very, very difficult to make a bow interesting as a weapon. Like when you define an entire class by the weapon it uses, you are limited to what the weapon is. And unfortunately, Ranger is very, very limited to the fact that it's a bow, because anytime that you introduce the fact that it can use swords, it's like, cool, but so can every other class.
I mean,
and that they just excel at it compared to Ranger. You know what I mean?
Legolas and Hawkeye, pretty cool.
Sure, if you're boring.
Oh, okay.
And basic.
Anyway, moving on before you offend everyone else there. So, Rogue.
we all know where this is going. We all know this is at least S tier.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say at least. It is S tier. It is a solid S tier.
No. I would like what I wanted to do with Fighter. I put Rogue in a double S tier if I could. Like Rogue is such an interesting class because it can do just everything but take a hit.
However,
but it's really good at dodging those hits.
However, it comes with a caveat. You have to know how to play a rogue. You have to not charge into battle. Cough, cough, Jonathan.
Because the rogue kind of plays itself sometimes too.
It does, but you have to be prepared for it. If you're going to be in a battle, let's put it this way. If you're going into sword art style boss rooms that are just these big empty rooms with a boss in it, Rogue's not going to be all that great for those encounters. And sometimes it's okay. Sometimes, it's able to find shadows and whatnot. But in a lot of the cases, unless they get a really, really, really high initiative roll, they're going to end up sitting on the side just doing marginal damage.
See, this is where we disagree. Because Arcane Trickster exists. There are so many ways where you can give yourself like some sort of magically created cover, right? Or make it so that way you have some sort of distraction or maybe like a mirror image of some sort. There's so many different ways to use like enchantments or illusions in your favor to weave in and out of combat without your enemy being any of the wiser. And this right here. And yes, you do have to know how to play your class.
That's what I'm saying. That is the only thing that I would say would keep it from a double S tier, is the fact that you have to know what you're doing. If you don't know what you're doing and you just charge into battle, you're gonna die. Like rogues are squishy, and they're meant to be. They're meant to be a glass cannon effectively. They come in, they do a ton of damage, or they are the sneaky guy that is able to, get in and lockpick and do all that kind of stuff. It's one or the other, but either way, they're never tanky. I dare you to find a tanky rogue. That would be really funny. I want to see someone do that now.
You can. I've created a couple. So in Magic the Gathering, there's this thing called a Luxodon, which is essentially a giant elephant. It's an elephant person. I never got to play this, but I always wanted to. Who has the tough feet.
I see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, that's not a tanky rogue though, because his AC is not high.
No, but you can. That's where you get different things that you can make that can make your AC high, right? Like there's ways.
Okay, magic items. I guess. Yeah.
No. Not even magic items. Just like you can take things like instead of taking like a stat boost or whatever, right? Or you just take a feat, and then just be able to use a shield.
Yeah,
you can make tanky rogues. It's just a matter of
I don't know why you do that.
I also don't know why you do that.
You're a rogue.
The memes is fantastic.
It's like you're level 4. You're not taking the mobile feat. What's wrong with you?
I never take the mobile feat, to be honest.
Oh come on, man! Mobile is overpowered as a rogue.
I'm always in the enemy's face. I'm just really good about taking the. I like stacking the extra actions if I can. Specifically, it's something I learned whenever I used to play rogue specifically, because I would weave in and out of combat. Like one of my favorite things, I used to play Earth Ganassi.
So here's the cool thing though, as a rogue with a mobile feat, you can both disengage and dash in the same action. Once you get,
really?
Yes, you can. With the mobile feat. That's why I said it's overpowered, because you can like sneak up on the guy, assassinate, disengage, and dash. He can't touch you. That's why it's so overpowered. I mean,
Is that a Baldur's Gate thing, or is that just like is that like a D&D thing? Because I've never done that.
That's a D&D thing. Like, just seriously look it up. I mean, XP to level 3 made a whole joke about that. Is like, what happens when a thief, a rogue reaches level 4? Is he takes the mobile feat.
I can see that. I can definitely see that.
Go watch that after this. It's pretty good. But okay, moving on. Now we have, I hesitate to say the 4 magic casting classes, because technically Artificer is a magic casting class, but it doesn't feel like one.
Honestly, I hesitate to even have it on this list as a unique
it
class,
is technically canon for 5th edition. I think what was it, Eberron that added that?
Yeah.
So yeah. I mean, yes, it's canon. So all right, well, first is Sorcerer. I'll be honest, I think this is the worst of the casting classes.
Really?
I do. I think Warlock is pretty solid as sort of your martial caster. And the fact that they get half their points back or they get their points back and everything at a short rest makes them really OP in that regard. And Wizards, the fact that they can learn every spell is insane.
Yeah, I can kind of see that.
Sorcerers, they're born with it. It's okay. Like, they're okay. You know, nothing particularly fancy about them. I don't think they're as good as the other two. So personally, I would put Sorcerer as B tier.
I think my biggest weakness or my biggest gripe with Sorcerers is that they're just inflexible. You know, I really like a flexible class. I feel like Sorcerers are inflexible. Granted, I think just based off their power alone, they're at least gonna avoid D and C tier, just based off of that alone.
Absolutely. I mean, there's no spell casting class. My goodness, that's gonna fall below a B tier.
Yeah, unless you're a bard or ranger, apparently.
I mean, they're technically spellcasters. They're as martial as monks are. So
yeah. But no, I agree. As in terms of these, the main 4. Yeah, I feel like Sorcerers. I think that's a good spot.
I think the only thing that keeps Sorcerer out of a C tier, to be honest, is the fact that they do have a decent number of subclasses that make it very different. So while they're inflexible, they do have a tendency to allow someone to choose a very specific build. I think Wild Magic Sorcery is very interesting. What was it? Storm Magic Sorcery is insanely overpowered. You know, so there's different ways to play it, but to your point, Sorcerers are extremely inflexible, and I think that's the only reason I put them personally lower than the other two.
Yeah, I mean, there's like the Celestial one, and there's a bunch of different features that you get from meta magic that's really, really powerful. But that's all it is that it's powerful. It's not it's not as
let's just say it. Sorcerers are kind of boring.
Yeah, well, I will say, I did see that. You remember when I told you I was complaining about the lack of like time-based mechanics and stuff in D&D? Yeah. When I was making Shard. So it turns out they actually have an entire, like, I think it's called like Clockwork Soul or something like that, that they used to have for Sorcerers that I did not know about. So it wasn't just Draconic Bloodline, Divine Soul, you know, whatever. Their Celestial, whatever it was called. They actually did have this Clockwork-esque kind of thing. I did not know. So that tells you how much I play Sorcerer.
Wow.
Yeah. So there's that's on me. I will say they did add like some sort of like shadow magic sorcerer thing or whatever, and I'm kind of interested about that.
Okay, I'll have to look into that at some point. But moving on to the next one is Warlock.
A tier.
I would agree with you. A tier, 100%. They are solid class, very versatile, very flexible. Like you can do a lot of different stuff with them. And the fact, like I keep saying it over and over, I found this out playing Baldur's Gate because I'd never played a Warlock before that. But Baldur's Gate 3 taught me that a Warlock regains their spell slots at a short rest. And I'm like, that's overpowered and I love it. I
like the Eldritch Invocations. I like that. I like the fact
cool.
that you can what I love about Warlock is that you get to augment the way that your playstyle works, right? That's something that you don't get with many other classes. I think Artificer is like the only other one. And then maybe Fighter technically does that too, where you get to augment specific abilities to work in a very specific way. And I love the fact that you can make your character be what you want. If you have a vision for like my biggest thing in a lot of video games and stuff like that, even Magic the Gathering, I'm like this with the whole like life gain, life drain mechanic, that life steal vampirism kind of deal. Right. I love that as a mechanic in games. And I love the fact that with things like Warlock, you have that ability. You have the ability to do the whole like leech life thing. I think that's sick. I love that. All of the necromancy as part of Warlock is really, really cool. Yeah, especially like when you get to play with your own life points, like when you get to play with your own HP. I love the fact that you get to like take on damage as temporary hit points instead. And that's just, I don't know. I've always loved that kind of stuff. It's fantastic, especially when you get into the ability to use like your soul as a weapon, right? Or like being able to use like the whole thing with like Hexblade. I absolutely love that as a storytelling aspect and a world building so cool. Also, so cool. Hunger of Hater is overpowered. Oh yeah. Oh my god. Okay, yeah, and next we have Wizards. Fireball, 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 Yep. No, yeah, I agree. I'll be honest. I think we have to. It's kind of obligatory because the company is named Wizards of the Coast. Well, not just that. The thing is, let's look at this. The fact that they are the lifeblood of what like, if I recall, Wizards were one of the original 3 classes back in the day. Yep. What was it? It was a fighter, wizard, and cleric, right? I think thief was in there. Was it thief? I think there was like a thief class, I believe. Maybe. Check us on that one down in the comments. Let us know. But the fact that wizards, and again, you're gonna be a broke wizard, but a wizard can literally learn every single spell. If they can find it on a spell scroll, you can learn the spell. Period. You just have to pay for it. That's it. Like it is an insanely overpowered and extremely flexible class. Yes, you are a glass cannon. It's literally pay to win. It's pay to win. Yes, you are a glass cannon. Yes, you have no armor whatsoever and you will get massacred repeatedly. But you can deal so much damage that it doesn't even matter. Like, honestly, a wizard built correctly does so much damage, and even a wizard built incorrectly. Just wizard built. If a wizard is built, they do damage. It doesn't have to be correctly, even if it's incorrectly. I think I told you this one time. I was playing a campaign with George and Jason. This was I think my very first D&D campaign I had ever played. I was a fighter. I was a fighter dwarf. I don't even remember the context. He was the most generic, bland, like whatever character. Jason comes in at the last minute, I believe. I'd been playing with someone else and I can't even remember who. Jason comes in at the last minute and George tells him, "We're fighting the gods, build a level 20 wizard." And he says, "You're giving me power to build a level 20 wizard." And he says, "Yes." He says, "So I can just make it however, right?" He says, "As long as it's vanilla." He's like, oh, I can do that. Why? He came in there and one-shotted in a single turn. He cast Time Stop and one-shotted 2 deities on one turn and then took out the Lady of Pain on the second turn. My God. I have never seen someone, I think he dealt, I want to say it was like over 3,000 damage. I don't know how he managed it, but somehow he dealt like 3,000 damage in 2 turns. That's how you build a wizard correctly. And put in the hands of someone like that, insanely overpowered. The main reason that I look at this and say has to be S tier. I would just keep it in S tier just because of the versatility. It is a toolbox. It's just a toolbox class. If you don't know what to do, have a wizard. Exactly. Yeah, like
if you're going into a campaign totally blind and you have a martial class and a healer of some kind and you need a third, go with a wizard.
Yeah, and honestly, as long as whoever your designated like meat shield is in the party, just have them take Sentinel. You're good. Just have them take Sentinel and you're good. You could genuinely, now that I'm thinking about this, you could genuinely just have, right? You could genuinely just have a healer. Mm-hmm. Just take turns healing the meat shield, and then like every now and then just top off the wizard just cause it's there. You know what I mean? And then that's all of your damage right there. You've got the himbo paladin, you've got the wizard that forgot that he was almost a century old, right? And then you've got the healer who, let's face it, they're the hot one. That's just the way it works. Like, I'm cool with that.
That really is true. But no, honestly, like I don't think there's any arguments. Like, if you think that wizard is not an S tier class, tell us why. Like, give specific reasons why. Because just saying I don't like a wizard.
Cite your sources.
Yeah.
Cite your sources and tell us why you are so wrong. Yes.
at me with those hands. No,
tell me if you're going to have a wrong opinion, tell me why your opinion is wrong. You know what I mean?
Exactly. So moving on from that, the last class, and I'm kind of struggling with this one because I'll be honest,
it's B tier.
Yeah, you know, I was thinking the same.
I will say it's high B tier though. Like, I would put it above Barbarian. I'd probably put it at the highest B tier.
Yeah.
It has so much potential, but we all know you're just trying to make a nuke.
Yeah.
We all know. You say you want to be like a tinkerer, and we get it, right? But there's one of two possibilities of you wanting to play Artificer. There's only two, right? You gotta pick one. You gotta essentially pick one flavor of Artificer. Either you're the person that played like World of Warcraft as a kid, and you like the idea of like the tinkery, engineery, like gnome, goblin, dwarf-esque kind of person. Like you want to be the gearhead, right? Or you played like League of Legends or something like that, and you want to be like a Heimerdinger. We get it. We know who you are. Or you just want to make a nuke.
So
if you want to be that guy, if you want to make a nuke, just say so.
So I gotta quote George Carlin here. One of my favorite bits from him, and this is absolutely the Artificer. He's scratching his head and says, "Boy, I sure would like to set those people over there on fire, but they're way over there. I wish I had some way to throw flames onto them." And then he went back home and he told his friend, you know, his friend who's good with tools. And he comes back a few hours later and says, "Hey, look at this." And then the army found them and said, "Oh, we'd like to buy 50,000 of them.
Yeah.
Please paint them dark brown. We wouldn't like anyone to see them." Artificer is that incarnate. He is the guy who shows up late to the part. Like, he's the one who was in a group project that didn't do anything, and then when the time came, he's like, "Don't worry, I got this," and submits the thing that like wins the assignment, that like completes the assignment. You get an A.
Yeah.
He didn't deserve it, but he's here anyway, and he did the thing. And you know what? Artificer in a nutshell.
Yep. I would genuinely I would maybe put it. I would be willing to put it at low A tier, but only just for flavor, for the same reason I gave about Barbarian.
You know what? I'm gonna agree with you.
Just because it starts with the letter A.
It gets a boost. Not just that, but the whole concept of artificers making ridiculous things. I know that Jason has, in our time playing, at least from what I've heard and what I've seen, made a giant Gundam. He made some kind of a flying motorcycle, like Hagrid's flying motorcycle in Harry Potter. Has become Batman. He has made an orbital bombardment cannon, has literally made nukes. I mean, that's, you know, with neither here nor there. He's made some kind of what's the I forget the name of the weapon. It's on Navy ships that shoots like
railgun.
No, not a railgun. It shoots like 40,000 rounds in a second or something like that.
It's a Warthog turret.
No, it's not the Warthog turret. It's mounted on Navy ships and it's meant to shoot down incoming missiles.
A SAM turret?
it's kind of a SAM. There's a specific, it shoots, they're not rockets, it's literally like bullets. And it just creates like this barrage of bullets to shoot down missiles. I don't know the name of it. If I can find the name of it, I'll put it up in the video, but that's basically what he made with a bag of holding and the spell catapult on a bunch of daggers.
Interesting.
Yeah, he was able to do like over 100 D100 damage every single turn. I don't know why George allowed that. Most OP thing, but
the one of my favorite bits of flavor for that little bit of campaign that we had recently, the what do you call it? The Spelljammer.
Yes.
I thoroughly enjoyed interfacing with the ship as a plasmoid.
Yes, that was interesting.
Yeah, I was one with the ship. It was phenomenal.
Oh, we're gonna have to get back to that campaign at some point.
I want to so bad.
Jonathan,
I want to
bugging
so
me.
bad. I had it custom painted, man.
Oh man, we'll get back to that at some point. But tell you what, I think this is a good place to leave it. This is our tier list on the D&D 5e classes. If you guys agree with them, let us know. If you don't, let us know. Like the video, dislike the video, something just to let us know you're watching. But I greatly appreciate every one of you. Alex, do you have any parting words for our lovely guests?
Yes, if you don't agree with Cleric being S tier, you're wrong.
Okay, and on that note, I'm gonna say, everyone have a great night. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, stay awesome.